Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Deborah Peters Show. It's a brand new year and it's a brand new month, and we have so much to look forward to. As you know, I've taken a little hiatus, but this is a special edition, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have my guest back for a second time. This show has always been so important to me because it's about the consciousness and of humanity and our ability to connect into spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, and find our way through life, developing ourselves and maximizing our potential and finding joy and serenity and peace in our daily activities and fulfillment. So that consciousness really has a way of lighting a spark in other people. And I wanted to just jump on here with this special edition show, even in the middle of my hiatus, and bring you a fantastic conversation about GodTalk, humanity's, let me make sure I get this right, experience of humanity's connections with a higher power. And so without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is none other than 39-time best-selling author, Neale Donald Walsch. And Neale, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Deborah. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for the invitation. How may I be of service?
Oh, that's such a great question, isn't it? Well, I think that what's happening in the world is there's a lot of mayhem. There's a lot of upheaval. There's a lot of fear. You know, I've been doing consulting work in the construction industry and the logistics industry across the nation. And mental health is a really big issue. In fact, it's being called the next pandemic, that mental health is really a big problem. Personally, I've had experiences with depression in my lifetime and really struggled to get my mental emotional state under some kind of I don't want to say control, but management. And what really helped me was realizing my connection with God. And actually, I brought myself out of a space where I didn't think God loved me at all or even existed for a brief part of my life, which contributed to, you know, the depression and whatnot. And I think people are really struggling right now with finding their way back home to that connection. And so I think that's a good place to start when you ask, how can you be of service?
Yes, well, thank you. And I do think it's a good place to start. It certainly was for me because I went through that same experience in my life. There was a time, Deborah, when everything in my life that could go wrong was going wrong. I mean, my relationship, my world of work, my occupation, and my health, all
Yeah.
three aspects of my life hit the bottom of the barrel, all within a 10-day period. Yeah, I lost my relationship. My marriage ended. It wasn't not, it wasn't bitter. It was an amicable separation, but I didn't want it to end. But okay, fair enough. I thought I can move on with my life. And 5 days later, I lost my job
Oh my
because
gosh.
not because I was not fired, because of a bad performance. As it turned out, the corporation that ran the company that I worked for, excuse me, was needed to offload some expenses, and so they
Yeah.
needed to reduce some overhead, and I was the last person hired, so I had no seniority. So last in, first out. So
Sure.
this is 5 days after I lost my relationship. I lost my job. Now I'm driving to an interview for another job. I thought I'm going to get this job hands down. I have all the qualifications. And I never got there because an elderly gentleman turned left in front of my car as I was driving down the road, made a left turn in front of me, misjudged the distance between our two cars, and totaled my automobile. Fortunately, he wasn't injured, but I suffered a broken neck in the car accident. Now I'm lying in the hospital. And as I come out of the anesthesia, the doctor says to me, Mr. Walsh, You had a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae posteriorly. I remember the wording exactly because it impressed me so deeply. A 3/4 inch fracture, isn't it? We're not talking about a hairline fracture,
Right.
about a break in your neck large enough to put a pencil through.
Yeah.
So he looks at me and he says, most people who have that kind of a fracture die because of spinal cord complications.
Sure.
And if they don't die, the few who do not die wind up paralyzed from the neck down. You, Mr. Walsh, have suffered neither consequence.
Fascinating.
Yes, but more fascinating was what he did next. He looked me straight in the eye, hovering over the table. I'm lying on the table, and he says to me, so what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Wow. You had a gift. What a gift.
He said, I want you to know you've been given a treasure. I've been in this business for a long time. You escaped the worst outcomes of the worst possible circumstance. What are you going to do with the rest of your days? So, of course, I couldn't give him an answer lying there on the table. I got back to my little apartment. I finally managed to get a little one-room apartment someplace, and I woke up in the middle of the night, Deborah, one night, and I was screaming in my mind, not out loud, but in my head, I'm screaming in my mind. What does it take to make life work?
Yeah.
What have I done to deserve a life of such endless struggle? Somebody tell me the rules. I'll play. Just
Right.
give me the rule book. And then I sat up and I found a yellow legal pad on the coffee table in front of me, because I was lying on the couch. This was a little modest one-room apartment. I'm sleeping on the couch every night. That's all I could afford. But I'm writing an angry letter to God, and I'm asking all of these questions. And my reaching out to God in such a desperate moment is what opened the door to me to a deeper and more real connection with the divine, in which I was told, by the way, in my conversations with God, that's not necessary. It's not necessary for us to reach the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, in
Right.
order for us to make a connection with God. But I was a stubborn kind of a person. So for me, that's what it took. You had to hit me over the head with a 2x4 in order for me to even begin to realize there really is a God, and it's possible that I could have a conversation with this aspect of divinity. But now, the gift we hope that has been given to people in the Conversations with God books, which preceded this latest book called GodTalk, is the fact that people are being informed by the divine that all of us are having conversations with God all the time. We're simply calling it something else. Most people
That's
don't want to
true.
be most people don't want to be marginalized or ridiculed. So they're not walking around saying, God spoke to me yesterday and here's what he said. So most people, if they have that kind of an experience, call it women's intuition, a sudden insight, an epiphany, a moment of brilliant inspiration, you
The
know,
universe.
whatever words they want to use that they can get away with, but they're having the same experience I had, which is the experience of information coming to us out of the clear blue sky, information that came from nowhere, from nothing we ever previously read or ever previously thought. But there comes the information. And if we're smart enough to really pay attention to it, in fact, if we write it down or capture it in some way, record it or whatever we can do, then we've suddenly found a way to reconnect with that aspect of the divine that I call in my languaging God.
Yeah, me too. So I just want to unpack that a little bit for people because it's interesting how we've compartmentalized this communication direct from God to us and then given it labels, which then creates a separation where we're actually not even aware or realizing that it's actually God guiding us. And so we've called it, you're right, intuition, epiphany,
A
the
psychic, a
universe,
psychic hit.
a psychic hit. Yeah, that's a good one. And all of these things are compartmentalizations with labels that actually, what it looks like to me, completely distracts us from what it really is, which is our relationship with God.
And here's the interesting part about that. Most people believe that there is an entity or a higher power, if you please, that I happen to call God.
Yeah.
Surveys have been taken by sociologists around the world in the past 10 years, and they've asked a single question. It was a one-question survey. They walked up to people in shopping centers, on street corners, in stores, everywhere around the world, in all the cultures, and asked a simple question. Do you believe in a higher power?
Mm-hmm.
Deborah, 85% of the respondents said yes.
Amazing.
So 8 out of 10 people believe in some sort of higher power. We can agree that there is something more going on here, if you please, more going on than meets the eye. But
Yeah.
here's what we can't agree on. If there is a higher power, is that higher power in direct communication with us? And that's where the screw turns. That's where the agreement breaks down, because most people does not believe that God would talk directly to us. Maybe he talks to the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury or the head ulama or the chief rabbi, or somebody who deserves to be communicated with. And in past days, of course, he communicated with all the saints and sages, etc. Moses and Muhammad and Jesus, of course, and all the Buddha, all the great masters, both male and female, through the years. But we don't believe that God would talk directly to us. So our opportunity here while we're on earth is to embrace the notion that, number one, there is a God, there is a higher power. And most people, as I said, agree with that. But number two, that God talks directly to human beings. Most people agree with that as well. Most people agree that God did talk directly to Moses and all the rest, et cetera, et cetera. But number three, that God would talk directly to us, that we are worthy, just as worthy as anyone, to receive information directly from the
That's
divine.
massive. It's massive because we've been taught the
Exactly.
opposite,
Exactly.
that you need this intermediary, that you can't. And there, there's even some religions that will say that the male can receive information, the male person in the relationship, but not the female. Like, it's crazy, the programming the stuff that's been made up.
Well, of course,
And
that part is true.
programmed with.
That we have to get straight on that. That part is true. Women are less worthy than men. Women are less sacred than men, less holy than men, less intelligent than men, and less everything than men. So if it's between men and women, it's clear that we are the superior of the species. But other than, wait a minute,
You're funny.
see, I've been taken over by the propaganda.
They got you. They got you. Yeah. So
whoever made up a story like that?
well, I've been doing some research into the meaning of scripture, and actually learning how to unpack, and it's a slow process because it's very deep, but learning how to unpack the real meaning, not the ego meaning of scripture that's used to control people. So, for example, St. Paul was the one that said that the man was the head of the house. And so when you unpack that, what he was really referencing is the relationship between the conscious and the subconscious and the superconscious, God. And so what he was saying is that when you commune with your own subconscious, that's like in the yin and yang, it's like a male energy, it's like yang energy. And so it got misinterpreted by people, by humans, that what he was saying is that's the husband, that's the male head of the household. And so it's been used for generations to suppress and control. And that was never the true meaning of it.
And I can tell you that the evidence of that is in my home. If I think for 1 minute that I am the head of my household, I've got it all completely backward.
Sure.
I know who the boss is in my house, and I call her that. I just tell her that directly. Whenever she has a question or an option that she places in front of us or whatever, I say the same thing every single time. Sweetheart, you're the boss.
You are the boss. What's that saying? Happy wife, happy life. So this is a question. This is a burning question I have for you. So, because I think we all have our own interpretations, and that's fine. Like, there's no judgment; it's not right or wrong. But I want to hear from you because you've authored so many books on your relationship with God and how that's actually helped you heal and tune your life around. So, who or what is God?
I've been asked that question many, many times.
Sure.
And when I asked God the same question, when I had my two-way interaction, I said to God, "Who are you?" I mean, what is the answer to the question? Who is God? And God answered me by simply saying, "Neale, sweetheart, every attempt to define God reduces God to the definable. God is indefinable. You can't define God.
Yeah.
There is nothing that is not God. God is the essential essence, the primary energy, that which life is, that which supports life, that which created life, that which sponsored life, that which initiated life. The God is life itself at the highest level of creation. So if you need to somehow come up with a definition that your logical mind can grasp, try this. God is pure love. That is, God is the kind of love that needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return. And when you love each other the way I love you, God is saying to Neale, when you love each other the way I love you, you will have solved every relational problem and most of the other problems in your life, as will your entire species on that particular planet on which you reside. We can't even love the person on the pillow next to us in that way.
Well, Neale, we most of us don't know how to love ourselves.
I couldn't agree more.
How are you going to love the person on the pillow next to you if you really don't fully understand how to love yourself?
Well, we can say that we love the person on the pillow next to us, but in the way that God is defining, in that way, with needing, requiring, demanding, and expecting nothing in return,
Yeah.
that's when we are really loving the other person. When we love them because of what they give us, give back to us, then it's transactional. Then love has become a transaction. I love you if. But God loves
Conditional.
us.
Yeah.
Yes, God loves us, I'm told, unconditionally. There's no if involved. It's not I love you if, I love you because you are my creation. So, what we have an opportunity to do in this particular lifetime, Deborah, is to change our idea about God and therefore change our idea about who we are, to embrace our true identity as individuations of divinity, and then to stop loving each other the way we imagine that God loves us with judgment, condemnation, and eternal punishment. I was
Yeah.
told, I give you an example of what I mean, in case you think I'm exaggerating. I was told in the third grade by a priest who came to our classroom. I went to a Catholic elementary school, and
I'm
the priest.
sorry.
Well, I'm glad. I have to. I don't want to. I'm not a Catholic basher, and I'm not a religion basher. Honestly, I'm glad I went to a Catholic school because at least it gave me a firm understanding that there's more going on here than meets the eye.
Sure.
It gave me firm clarity that there is an entity called God. So I'm very grateful for that gift. But some of the teachings beneath that assertion, that's where some of the problems come in with all of the world's great religions, not just Catholicism,
Sure.
but all of the world's great religions which purport to tell us what we can wear, what we can eat, what we shouldn't wear, what we shouldn't eat, what we should do, what we should not do, and all the rest. All the rules and regulations that we imagine that God has placed on humanity. And because of this, we have placed rules and regulations on each other because religions teach us to do our best to imitate or to act in a godly manner. So if it's good enough for God, if God is judgmental, condemning, and punishing with us, why shouldn't it be okay for us to be judgmental, condemning, and punishing with each other, which is exactly the world that we have created?
Good. That's good. Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
I'm
the
just,
solution to all of this is placed in a book that I've created, the title of which is The God Solution, which talks about what would happen if we decided that our very definition of God, our understanding of God is incorrect, invalid, inaccurate. We have an inaccurate understanding of God. What if God needed nothing from any of us anymore? And when I asked God about that, by the way, because this, again, I'm repeating what I was told in my conversations with God. And I said to God, oh, come on, this is almost too good to be true. This is too good to be true. And God said to me, sweetheart, if God can't be too good to be true, who can?
mm. So your conversations with God have always been very loving. That's what I'm getting.
Not only loving, but unconditionally accepting. God doesn't have a set of rules that says we have to act in a certain way or we must do certain things in order for us to be acceptable, to say nothing of returning to God in the afterlife. But that if we don't obey those rules, we're going to be suffering everlasting damnation. I started to tell you a story, I never finished it. The priest told us when I was in third grade, I'm 9 years old, and I raised my hand. I asked a question, Father, can you give us an example of a mortal sin? Because he was explaining the Catholic theology about mortal sin and venial sin. Mortal sin being a sin that if you die with it on your soul without being confessed and being given absolution by a priest, if you die in a state of mortal sin, you go straight to hell, no questions asked. Venial sin is kind of a spiritual misdemeanor, so kind of a little white lie or whatever it might, but not a major, major infraction. So I'm asking the priest, Father, can you give me an example of what is a mortal sin? And I'm expecting him to say, well, murder, or if you steal someone's life savings, or child abuse, something really, really horrible. He says to, oh, sure, son, it's a mortal sin if you miss church on Sunday.
Oh my God.
No kidding. I'm
Oh my
I'm
God.
9 years old and I'm taking this in. If I miss church 1 week of my life on Sunday and I don't get to confession fast enough and I die, I get hit by a car, maybe hit by a car on the way to confession, I go straight to hell for the rest of eternity? And I couldn't believe it. By the way, to this day, I find it unbelievable that the church teaches this. So I checked 4 years ago. Roman Catholic theology to this day, the Catholic
Wow.
Church teaches that if you miss Mass on Sunday without a good excuse, if you're caring for a sick parent, fair enough. Or if you have to work to make a living for your family, okay. But if you just go off to play a game of golf one Sunday because your best friend has come into town, somebody you haven't seen in 10 years, and you want to celebrate, your reunion, so you go to play a game of golf on Sunday morning and you miss Mass that particular Sunday. Boy,
Talk
you'd better
about
get to,
control.
no
Wow.
kidding. Talk
No
about
wonder
filling
people have a negative relationship with God.
talk about filling the pews with fear.
Yeah. Wrong motivation. So right now, I feel, well, I have two things. So let me back up. So I think that for me, what I notice is when I ask for guidance, I get it. When I don't ask and I'm just in my head trying to figure it out on my own, you know, it's not like there's an assertion where God steps in and takes over my life. Like that to me, that just doesn't happen. But what if I ask? If I ask then for help, guidance, the answer, it just is like, so is that what you're advocating is people just need to learn to let themselves ask?
It goes one step beyond that, if I might.
Okay.
In my understanding, we must not only ask, but believe that we
Mm,
will receive the answer. Or as one person said a couple of thousand years ago, as you believe,
yeah.
so will it be done unto you.
Mhm.
So it's not just a question of asking, it's a question of believing that you will receive a response. And the response might, by the way, come to us in one of many forms. It might come to us, as words in our mind, fair enough, or it could come to us as a chance utterance that we overhear in the coffee shop, or the lyrics of the next song we hear on the radio. That actually happened to me in my life. I was really concerned about a major issue in my life. I didn't know what to do, but I was trying to get on with my life, trying to go through the motions. I get in the car to go to work, turn on the radio, which was my habit, and the song that's on the radio had the lyrics that were directly
Mm.
attendant to the issue that I was looking at. I thought, no way in the world, no way in the world. But there were the clues that I was looking for in the lyrics of that song. So it could be, as I said, the chance utterance of a friend on the street. So God will speak to us in 1,000 different ways. Let me give you one other example, if I can. I
Sure.
was in the men's department in the menswear department of a major store a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, to buy, looking for a sport coat. But suddenly I smelled gardenia, and I said to the man in the store, the manager of the department, is the store's fragrance department nearby? Is the counter across the way? I'm smelling gardenia. He said, no, no, no. The perfumes are downstairs on the lower floor of the store. I said, really? But I'm smelling gardenia. He said, I don't smell that. I said, wow, that's
Wow.
so now let me finish the story. I get home and I realize on the way home, gardenia was my mother's signature fragrance.
Yeah.
She wore it as her favorite fragrance all of her life. Whenever I smelled it, I thought of my mother. I need to
Mhm.
call mom. I picked up the phone and I called mom. It was the most important conversation I ever had with her. And as it turned out, sadly, she was not with us much longer after that.
So powerful.
Now, I wouldn't have had that final closing conversation with her if I hadn't received a very clear message in the form of her fragrance.
And if you wouldn't have
Call,
acted on it,
yes,
paying attention, being present with it. I get it in bumper stickers,
yes,
billboards.
exactly, exactly. The words on the next billboard is to turn the corner around. That's precisely correct.
Yeah. Yeah, like so the other night, I haven't been feeling well. I've had this stomach flu, and the other night I was out for a walk and I was just kind of like inching my way down the street and I saw this bumper sticker on this car. It said, "It'll pass." And I was like, thank you. You know, just gave me some hope that I was going to feel better. And then another time I was driving down the freeway and I was thinking about um, a client that I was having some contractual issues with. And there was this giant billboard, Neale, that said, "You have more power than you think." And I was actually going to his office to renegotiate, and it worked out perfect. It was like, wow, thank you.
Thank you for bringing up those wonderful examples. Exactly right. And sometimes people are waiting for, words to come to them and they're going to write them down real fast. And that's one way that can happen, but it's
Sure.
far from being the only way. I was told by God, sweetheart, I'm going to communicate with you in 100 different ways across 1,000 moments in a million lifetimes.
Mm. Say that again.
That again.
Not that part. I'm going to communicate with you.
She said, say that again. So I said
I
that
know
again.
you're so naughty. The other part.
God told me, Neale, I will communicate with you in 100 ways across 1,000 moments in a million lifetimes.
God, I felt that in my heart when you said it. I still do. It's just makes me want to cry. It's like so beautiful.
And I've experienced it as reality. I've heard communications from the divine in 100 different ways. Yes, across 1,000 moments. Absolutely. One striking example, as to give you, I'm driving home from a party. It was, it was one of those late night parties, and I left my friend's house at 2:30 in the morning. And I'm coming home, after a very late night party, had a wonderful time, and I'm driving home, and I come to a stop at a stop sign. Now there's nobody on the street. It's 2:30 in the morning. The streets are
Sure.
deserted. So I hit the brake at the stop sign. Then I put my foot on the accelerator to go through the intersection, and I hear in my head suddenly, for no apparent reason at all, I just hear the word stop. So automatically, my foot left the accelerator and slammed down the brakes for no apparent reason, just as a car came whizzing left to right across the intersection. I swear he was not there 1 second
Yeah,
prior, but he
I
must have
get
turned
you.
onto the street and suddenly showed up. It was some teenage kid. I could tell by when he went. It's a young kid driving like 65 or 70 miles an hour through a 30-mile-an-hour
Oh my
intersection.
God.
And if I
Maybe
hadn't
taking you
stopped
out.
for no
Mhm.
apparent reason, I wouldn't be here to talk about it. Now, somebody explain to me what that is about. Where did that impulse come from? Who told me to stop?
I know.
And when I received information, I remember having another piece of information. Doesn't really matter what it was, but I remember having an idea in my head that seemed so true. And I was lying on my back porch wondering, could that possibly be true? God, I wish I could just get a sign from you. How do I know that that's true? How do I know that? And in the middle of my sentence, out of nowhere, I swear, a shooting star
Mm,
streaks across the sky out of no place. And I'm like, are you kidding me? If
I
you
love it.
ask God for a sign, be careful because you'll get one. So I use those examples to help people understand that there are, in fact, God will communicate to us in 100 different ways across 1,000 moments in a million lifetimes.
It's beautiful. It's so true. The key is to not discount it and to be present with it. Um, I've got into the habit of saying thank you. I'll just say thank you because that's the information I needed. And I feel like that deepens my connection. It's like opens up the bandwidth for me to receive kind of thing.
I think you're right. I think it trains our mind. My experience has been that your mind is like a dog or a pet. You can
Mhm.
train your mind, and in fact, your mind wants to be trained. It yearns to know how it can be of service to you. So
Yeah.
yes, when we use gratitude as a very powerful energetic, then the mind understands, oh, I see what's happening here. And the mind then begins to open more frequently and more widely to the kinds of communications that you and I are talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So your new book, God Talk, is it a compilation of these kinds of experiences? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, most publishers, wait for an author to call them. When I write a book, I've written 40 books. When I write a book, I have to find a publisher. My literary agent usually does that, but they try to find a publisher who's willing to put the book out. In this case, for the first time in my life, my phone rang. A publisher called me. It's never happened before. That happens very seldom. But a publisher called me and said, Neale, would you be willing to write a book for us about how people can move closer to the experience that you had that you called Conversations with God? I said, sure,
Mhm.
I'd be very happy to do that, from the For What It's Worth department. And they assured me that people would find it of great value. So I sat down very quickly. I mean, it came through me so quickly. In like 4 or 5 weeks, I wrote the entire book. Not that it's a big, thick, fat book, but I did write it, very quickly. And I offered 6 steps that people could follow to help them move closer to the experience of Conversations with God. Then the publisher did something very clever. They went on the internet and they put an invitation on the internet saying to the general public, if you feel that you have ever had intervention from
Mhm.
the divine in your life, send us your story. And hundreds of people sent stories into the publisher.
I
They
love
picked
that.
out they picked out some of the most interesting and fascinating stories and put those in the book because they wanted to make the point that it's not just this guy, in Oregon, Neale Donald Walsch, who has conversations with God. Many people have experienced direct intervention in their life by the divine, and here are their stories, so that they could broaden the scope of the book to show people that there's more than one person who's having this kind of conversation. In fact, that we all are. Then they asked me to elucidate the 6 steps that I have found useful in my life, and those 6 steps are included in the book and described in great detail. Steps you can take to have your own conversations with God. If we have enough time, I can give you those 6 steps.
Yes, that'd be an awesome way to wrap up the show, please.
Okay, well, step number one, possibility. We have to agree with ourselves that it's possible that God exists and that God would talk directly to us. Step number two, worthiness. We have to agree that we are worthy to receive direct communication, one on one, from the divine to us. Step number three, willingness. We have to be willing to experience such an encounter. And that's not a small step, by the way, because many of the world's religions tell us, I'm sorry, tell
No,
us,
it's fine.
many of the world's religions tell us that if we are saying to other people that we're having communications directly from God, that we're committing blasphemy,
I know.
we're committing heresy, that it's apostasy. So we have to be willing to overcome the teachings of our religions that say it can't happen
Truth.
and
That's
step
true.
into it. Step number four, wakefulness. To be wakeful, to be wide awake, to pay attention, as we said earlier in this program, to what's happening, how it's happening, and to the messages that we are receiving in those 100 different ways. Step number five, acceptance. That when we receive the message, don't write it off. Don't say, it's just a coincidence, or
Yeah.
it's just serendipity, or it's just one of those weird things. No, accept it exactly for what it is. And then step number six, discernment, that we
Mm.
can find a way to notice the difference between messages from the divine and messages that come to us in many ways from other different sources. These days, from the internet, and of course, from television, and from other people as well. So, to make sure that we use discernment, we can tell that the messages come to us from the divine. Those messages always are characterized by freedom, joy, and love. And that's how we can
Mm.
know that those messages are from the divine. So, those are the 6 steps: possibility, worthiness, willingness, wakefulness, acceptance, and discernment. And I discuss them in much greater detail, of course, in the book itself.
Yeah, you got to get the book. Absolutely. Got to get the book. And so I like the willingness part. I think that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Yeah, my picture seems to have frozen.
I know, but we've got your audio, so let's keep going. We've got, well, oh, I lost him. Hang in there with me, you guys. He'll come back on. I have to tell you that earlier this morning, his internet was out, and but he got it back up just in time for the show. So hopefully he'll be able to log back in. What I was going to say is that it's the willingness to receive the message that is really crucial. If you have the willingness to receive the message, then the message can come. But if you've got up this like wall, he's back. If you've got up this wall, or welcome back. I was just saying that the willingness is the key. You have to be willing to receive the message. And if you have up a wall, and a wall can just be limiting belief, or it can just be a false premise, that that can be a wall that can keep it from coming through.
For sure, absolutely. And so, yes, willingness is a huge step. We've got to be willing to overcome all the messages we've received from our culture, from our philosophies, from our religions that tell
Yeah.
us that, come on, God is not going to talk directly to you. Come on. Maybe if
I,
you're the Pope, but nobody else.
right. And what I'm observing is that there's a collapsing of that program. I call it a program. There's a collapsing of that program. More and more and more people are awakening to this awareness that you're speaking of. And they're actually giving it their attention. And whatever you give your attention to expands and grows. And within that switch of focus, it's like driving down the road. If you're focused over here, your vehicle is going to go over here. If you're focused over here, your vehicle is going to go over here. So when you shift your focus from I'm not worthy, it's not possible, I can't receive these messages, I'm under this spell or program of this religious dogma that says that it can only be through them, and you start to shift your focus to I'm open, I would like to receive, how do I do this, God? What are your thoughts on this? When you start to do that with yourself, you actually shift your focus to that relationship with God. And so this thing over here no longer has its hold on you. And my observation of what's going on in humanity is there's definitely a shift. And obviously your writings have contributed to that immensely, because back in the 90s, and I think it was early 90s, I read your trilogy, Conversations with God, and it lit me up, it just lit me up, and it affirmed what I already knew, gave me more information that I hadn't thought of. And it really helped me be consistent with asking.
It did the same thing for me, Deborah. I want you to know that I experienced it in the exact same way that you experienced it. I didn't experience myself as writing a book. I experienced myself as simply taking dictation.
Ah,
I would simply ask a question and then take dictation to make sure that I captured the answer. And that's been my experience from the very beginning.
what a
Taking
great way to
dictation.
write. Yeah.
So, and part of what I was told, because I never even imagined, by the way, it started off as a very sacred personal experience between me and, the God of my understanding. But I never imagined, I never told anyone else about it. I wasn't going to share it with anybody because I myself didn't want to be ridiculed or marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't share it with anybody. But then I was told in the conversation, Neale, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. And I can recall thinking, oh, now I got you. Now I got you. Because if I was making this all up in my head, if this really is just my imagination, that's not going to happen. There's no publisher who's going to publish a book by a guy who claims to be talking to God. I mean, I could just hear the publisher running out to the workroom floor saying to his editors, hold the presses, stop everything. I got a guy here who's talking to God. It's not going to happen. Nobody's going to publish a book like that. But
wow, it did.
I sent my notes to a handful, like 3 or 4, not 10 or 20, but 3 or 4 small publishers. And one of them called me and said, we're going to put this book out. I said, you're kidding me. You're going to actually publish the book? They said, yeah, we love it. We're going to put it out. And I thought, it's not going to sell 500 copies. Nobody's going to buy a book by a guy who claims to be talking to God. And I was right. I was totally accurate. It did not sell 500 copies. It sold 5 million.
Unbelievable.
I'm not bragging. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So when God tells you,
I was one of them.
Yeah. When God tells you you're going to write a book and it will be accessed by many people, probably should believe the information that you're receiving.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been phenomenal. So this, I want to just kind of do a summation here, and then you can tell us how to find your book and whatnot. So the summation here is that you can talk to God. And when you have a desire, I have to use my words, and then you can fill in the blanks. When you have that desire or curiosity, when you have that curiosity to have that conversation, it's just as simple as talking to yourself, talking out loud. Like I often talk out loud. I don't say it in silence to myself. I'll say it. I walk down the street talking to myself out loud all the time. And I'm actually literally having conversations with God. So there's that. And then there's the receiver and like being receptive to the guidance that comes back and not discounting it. And actually, the word I would use would be to have reverence for that response. You know, it's like, thank you. You just made my life easier. And I think that's what this is all about. You know, we live on planet Earth. It's a beautiful planet, but it's filled with resistance, you know. It's everything we go to do seems to be hard when we're doing it alone. And so how do you get out of that struggle is to get into alignment with your relationship with God and have those conversations like it's your best friend you're talking to every day, all day long.
Which is why I wrote a book titled Friendship with God.
Ooh. So you're like a walking library. We need to get all your books. Can we buy them in a package?
If you're willing to buy 40 books, yes.
That's awesome. And how do we get those books?
Well, you know, you can get the books at any online bookstore, really. You know, I don't sell them. I don't have a store on my website. You can just go to any online bookstore and buy any book you want. Just type in the name Neale Donald Walsch, and the titles will come up for you, and you can buy whatever or obtain whatever book you'd like to get. I also offer several of my books, 5 or 6 of them, at no cost on my website. So people can find out more about that by just going to my Facebook page, Neale Donald Walsch at Facebook, or my website, neildonaldwalsch.com.
Awesome. Neale, you are, thank you. You're just thank you for doing it, for sitting down and doing it. You know, it's such a blessing, and it's from the heart, and it's authentic. So I know it's made a difference in my life and anyone that takes the time to read them.
Thank you, Deborah. It makes me feel
cry.
humbly grateful to know that some small thing that I may have had the privilege of being a part of has touched people's lives in a beneficial way. It's kind of you to tell me that, and thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And thanks for the opportunity to share these moments with you. I hope it has served you.
100%. Like, it touched my heart. To have someone of your dedication and service to humanity to be on my show, thank you.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. And come back again, okay? We'll do this again.
Okay.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate you. This recording will be up on all the major podcast platforms as soon as it renders. It takes a day or two, so you can listen to the recording. Please share it, like it, subscribe, get it out to all your friends, and really appreciate you being here today. This is a big year, I feel, for all of us. It's going to be momentous change. And when you're looking outside of yourself for answers to your friends, to your family, they can only guide you so much because they're going through their own transitions and changes and growth. So I really want to encourage you to get Neale's books and, you know, start talking to God and asking for guidance and thanking God for guiding you and asking for signs and messages, and just open your heart and go with it. So thank you, Neale, for being here. And remember, everybody, stay aligned, stay alert, and stay awake.